Hello, everyone. Welcome to our pest and garden series. Our topic today is the 10 top blooming trees for the landscape. My name is David Rodriguez. I'm the horticulturalist here in Bexar County, San Antonio, with the Texas AgriLife Extension Service. And we're probably going to cover more than 10 trees after putting this presentation together, but it's all good. There's my email address, so don't hesitate if you need to send me an email. Send us gardening landscape questions. If you need something identified, please send a good quality image attached, not part of the email, and we'll help you as best we can. A little bit about the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Over 104 years in our great state of Texas. We're part of the Texas A&M University system, the educational arm of the land grants in College Station, the oldest institute of public higher education in our great state of Texas. A unique partnership with the 254 counties in our great state of Texas, and funded separately from the land grant university. So let's go ahead and talk about our topic today, 10 top blooming trees for the landscape. So we like to do basic principles of horticulture. So let's cover a little bit about tree selection, planting, and maintenance. We really want you to follow these three P's: plan, plan, and plan. Really think it out about these trees. So let's cover a little bit. So when we go into the nursery, we look for a shade tree, and the trees we're really going to cover today are ornamental flowering trees, which are typically multi-trunk trees, small trees, or big bushes, depending on how you train them and prune them. So we're not talking about large shade trees today. But in general, bigger doesn't mean it's better. So we look at a scale. You got the top of the tree, the leaves, the canopy, and the root system. So when you buy a quality plant or a tree, you want a good balance of top to the roots. You don't want a big tree in a very small container. Fall is for planting. So the ideal time to plant most plants and trees would be October through the month of May now. But really fall and winter, or some of these trees when they're blooming, and we'll talk about certain species, probably purchase them when they're blooming to make sure that's the color, the hue that you want in that particular plant. You can plant container trees any time of the year, but really October through late May is the ideal time. So let's plan, and plan. Location, location, location. Does this plant need full sun? Will it do better as an understory tree in shade, particularly in the hot summer heat of July and August? How big is it going to get? How tall? How wide? So all those are very important, and all those are considerations that we really need to have a game plan before any tree is purchased or planted. We have to work with the native soil when we plant most of our plants. So we look for species that are not only native, but most important, well-adapted species of plants that are available, that have really made the test of time, low inputs, and overall the best selections. So we've got to work with the native soil. Soil drainage is very important. The deeper the soil, the better. But unfortunately, most of us don't have that deep soil. So we have to work with what we have. And if the soil's not in the best condition, if it's kind of clay, rocky, or caliche, or in a sandier area, maybe cut that native soil, mix in, blend in 20% of a high grade finished compost. So you never want to dig a crater in the ground, just backfill it with just straight landscape potting mix or whatever, because you're making a swimming pool. So often we'll overwater when it rains, you'll rot out that plant. Plus, where are those roots going to grow in its new environment? As a general rule of thumb, for most plants, we dig a hole twice as wide as the existing container, and you plant it maybe an inch or so above grade. So if it settles, you're not planting it too deep. Unfortunately, most trees are planted too deep. So if we plant them an inch and a half higher than grade, that's probably a little bit better. So we have to make sure we have a balance of top to the roots, and we need to gently tamp the size of that container and examine those roots. Don't pull on that trunk real hard and disturb that root system. But are the roots nice and white, showing that you have a very healthy, vigorous tree? Do you have a ton of roots that are just girdling around that root ball? And if that's the case, we need to really, really open up that root ball. Maybe massage it open, get a utility knife or a sharp knife, and put an X, an eighth of an inch on both sides of that root ball to rejuvenate those roots. That way, when we water, that water's getting right into that root ball, and then the roots start running into the native soil. If it makes you feel better, maybe use a little plant insurance. Get a gallon of root stimulator and use it as recommended on the bottle. And most plants and trees, you don't want to fertilize till typically the next major feeding season, which is about 6 months or so. So we've done a good job. We've worked with a Texas certified nursery professional. We've done a little bit of research of the species of the tree. We have the proper place in our landscape, as we covered already. So you never want to handle the tree by the trunk. You want to carry it by the container. And you don't want to put it in the back of your pickup truck and go 74 miles per hour, which is a Category 1 hurricane on the highway. So you want to gently transport it, maybe get a bag of mulch and compost and support that tree in the back of the pickup truck, wrap it real good so the wind doesn't shred it to pieces. Most of these trees and big trees, as well as these small ornamental trees, you really don't do too much pruning. Normally we say 2 years. Don't prune the tree. You want as much leaf mass for photosynthesis and carbohydrate production for the tree. Let it root in, let the leaves shade the trunk and the root system. And then after year 2, depending on the species that we're going to talk about, then you start pruning them accordingly. When we prune, we only seal the cuts of oak trees immediately with pruning paint so we can minimize the spread of oak wilt. But all other species of trees, we don't use pruning paint. We always have a reason when you prune or trim a plant. We use sharp instruments, pruners, loppers, etc. And we train them, and we'll talk about different trees. Most of the pruning would be during the dormant season, or when we look at the tree when it leaves out in the springtime, if it had any winter kill on it as well. Feeding trees, late February, early March. We use the same fertilizer, the 1959 premium fertilizer, the same fertilizer that you would use for your spring or fall vegetable garden, or the same fertilizer that you use around mid-April, early May for your warm season turf grass for springtime. So we feed trees mid to late February, early March. Use about 1 pound of this 1959 premium slow release fertilizer for every inch of tree trunk. If it's a single trunk tree, if it's a multi-trunk tree of 2-3 trunks or more that's been trained like that, then you use 1 pound per every 3 feet of height. You put the fertilizer in the drip line, which are the outskirts branches of the tree, and you evenly distribute it, scratch it in a little bit if need be, and then thoroughly water it in. If the plant, particularly young trees that are 5 years or younger, if the plant really moves and grows 6 weeks thereafter, do another application at half the rate, and then again about late August, early September. So 2 times minimum, up to 3 times a year, just like we eat every day. Nutrition is very important on these young trees, particularly the first 5 years. When you use a synthetic traditional fertilizer such as the 1959, seal that bag immediately, store it away, but most important, water that fertilizer in real well after you apply it. We want to keep the tree focus of no grass, weeds, or competition. So ideally 10 feet from that main trunk, no competition. And we want to use a 2-inch thin layer of an organic double shredded hardwood mulch. Maybe that has a little bit compost in it, what we refer to as a living mulch. Do that in May before you go into the summer heat. And when you come out of the summer heat, replenish it again in September. We can all agree most of us don't have the best, deepest soil, the richest organically enriched soil. So mulching really, really makes a difference. Cuts back on weeds. It's aesthetically pleasing, but we don't want to put any extra soil or mulch up on the crown of any tree. And we want to start seeing the flare roots start appearing. So that's very, very important. But keep it clean. If you keep too many young plants, grass and weeds up on any type of a plant, trees, fruit trees, or other, they're thieves. Their weeds are thieves. They'll compete against water and steal the nutrition as well. So we're going to talk about ornamental flowering trees mainly today. And again, most of these are small tree species. Many of them grow 12 to 15 feet tall. Some of them about 20 feet or so, but they're small trees, most of them. So the first one we're going to talk about are your redbud trees. Redbud trees basically kick off springtime. So when you start seeing the redbud trees, normally spring is here or almost here. And they're a beautiful tree. If you see the picture on the bottom right, they're in the pea family, the bean family. They're a type of legume, so they have bean pods. It's a beautiful ornamental tree. You can grow redbuds as a single trunk tree, or some people train them 3 to 5 trunks. When you train most of these trees 3 to 5 trunks, again, you don't prune them till about year 2 until they size up, good girth on the main wood of the tree, and you skirt them up appropriately to get underneath them, to walk or whatever to the appropriate height. When you do pruning from January, February on most of these plants, when they're dormant, you want to remove no more than about a third of the total canopy of the tree. Redbuds give you a little bit fall color. Some of the leaves turn yellow and then they go dormant. They drop all their leaves. So they're considered a deciduous tree. A little bit more in-depth information of redbud. And we really want to make sure we do not look for eastern redbud. Some places are still selling eastern redbuds. And a lot of those seeds are collected in parts of the country that aren't suited for our climate and are most important our soils here. So eastern redbuds really perform on very acidic type soils. And the predominant soils that most of us have are very high buffered clay calcareous type soils with a very extremely high pH. So Texas redbud, a Mexican redbud, which has a much, much more shinier leaf than the Texas redbud, and then Oklahoma redbud, which Texas and Oklahoma is basically about the same species of redbud. Normally, we tell folks on redbuds, when you start seeing them bloom around town, it's amazing of all the different colors. Some look pink, some look red, some even have a purple tinge in the flower of it. So it's probably best on this species of tree to look at them when they're blooming. Is that the hue? Is that the color that you're happiest with? And that way you're guaranteed that you see that bloom year in and year out. Very beautiful flower on the redbud trees. Our next tree that soon at the same time or soon after that the Texas Mexican redbud are kicking off spring is the Texas mountain laurel, another true native tree. They call it, the species is Segunda Flora, meaning Texas mountain laurel sets their primordia flowers in the fall time. You see the little rat tail flower appendages in the fall time, and the second flower of that plant blooms in the springtime. And sometimes it has that grape cooler fragrance to it that you can smell from a long distance away. The best Texas mountain laurels, they really need to be hydrozoned in the landscape. They're predominantly grown in the Edwards Plateau region where they grow on outcrops of limestone and they need super good drainage. So that's part of the planting process in some of these species of plants, that we're not putting in an area that we're watering weekly, like St. Augustine lawn or plants that need a lot of water. So you need to make sure they do need full sun. They're best trained as 3 to 5 trunks, basically a multi-trunk small tree or large shrub type. They're evergreen, And Molly Keck, our entomologist, will talk a couple pests that the Mount Laurel skid as well in the next part of the two-part series that we have. Beautiful flowers, again in the legume bean family, very fragrant, unbelievable, very shiny leaves, and they are evergreen as well. Some people call them mescal bean. They have those fully ripe seeds that start breaking out of the a bean pod, and it's an elutinate bean, so you got to be careful with that. And some people also call these peanut trees because once the bean pods set on the tree, they look like little peanuts. So it's kind of a cool looking plant as well. If you're fortunate, there are a few rare selections of white ones that are very, very hard to find. But sometimes driving around, you will see it. Similar to the Texas bluebonnet. You know, you might see a white bluebonnet here. Sometimes you can see a beautiful white Texas Mount Laurel as well. A true native tree, hardy, but just place it in the right place in a full sun area of your landscape that drains very well. A real close cousin of Texas Mount Laurel in the same genus Sophora is Eve's necklace, Sophora affinis, pink flowers. And this plant will take a little bit more shade, a little bit more shade. It is deciduous, it loses all its leaves in the wintertime. Gives you a little bit of a fall color, yellow leaves kind of before they drop in the fall time. The flowers are pink, they're very fragrant, very showy. They have that unique Eve's necklace seed pod on it as well, which is kind of cool to look at as well. It's not going to be as dense, as compact as the Texas mountain laurel, and you can train this as a single trunk tree. Some people train them as two or three major trunks, evenly spread out, but it performs very well as a single trunk tree. They will tolerate a little bit more shade, and they're probably happiest if they get a little bit late afternoon summer sun, but they can be adapted into a full sun location. Eve's necklace is one of these trees that a lot of people don't know about, and probably a tree that we really need to consider more in the landscape and probably use it a little bit more often. It's a very nice, small type of a tree to consider, and that unusual flower as well on it as well. Oh man, this tree here, Anacahuite, I like just saying the name. Anacahuite is your wild olive. Some people call it Texas olive, some people call it Mexican olive. It is truly a native to 3 or 4 counties deep in South Texas, but we're seeing these cordias bloom all over the place from late spring into the summer months into the first fall. Big, semi-large leaf to it, beautiful, beautiful white fragrant flowers. Look at this beautiful picture with the San Antonio Tower of America in the background. Now, people refer to it as olive, but the fruit looked like an olive, but it's not in the olive family. When the plant is in full bloom and the blooms start falling off when they're starting to bloom out, it looks like going into the summer, late spring, summer months. It looks like snow on the ground, which is another added feature. The yellow center of it attracts pollinators. You get a few different unique moths at nighttime and butterflies, and a few hummingbirds during the daytime for the nectar. So it's a great pollinator plant, nectar plant as well. Now we have to take a little bit caution with this plant. If you live really north of San Antonio and beyond, we're probably not going to recommend this plant. It's more for mid San Antonio and south of us, maybe east and a little bit of west within a 100-mile radius of San Antonio because they are somewhat cold tolerant. If we have a cold spell, it completely defoliates the plant. But if you go up more north, it might not come back the following year. So selection is important where you're going to locate it at. Full sun, excellent soil drainage, and you can trim it up as a single trunk tree or two or three trunks as well. And that's where it gets its common name olive on it because it has fruit that look like olives, but again, they're not in the olive family. They are not really recommended for us to eat as well. A cool plant, very different, and one of the prettiest, largest blooming white flower plants to consider if you have the proper place in your landscape. Mexican plum is used quite a bit on commercial as well as residential landscapes. There are bush or thicket type species of plums that grow in Texas. This is a cultivated one that does have a single trunk appearance to it. And plums have, like the ornamental plums with the edible ones as well, have beautiful, very beautiful white flowers before the leaves come out in the springtime. And then you have the little fruitum. The flowers are fragrant, and the fruit are probably more considered for a wildscape. I know some people can make jams and jellies out of the plum, so it's really not a really good fruiting type plum for us like you would plant a mentally and a Santa Rosa plum in our area of the state. So it's more ornamental, wildscape, more for the flowers than anything else. If you don't harvest the fruit, then the wildlife and birds and things like that will get to them, but they can make a mess if nothing's eating them. So take that into consideration as well. Very xeric, very drought tolerant once it's established, and it's some of them do have little thorns, depending on the age of the plant and where it was selected from, the seed source as well. This is a real cool tree, more of a bush type, multi-trunk tree. It's best as multi-trunk as a small tree bush type. Look at the leaf, this white flowering Anacacho orchid tree, very small little dainty-like flowers. There's about 3 selections or subspecies of Congesta that are out there. There's a pinkish purple one. There's a white with a stamen that kind of shoots out with a little tinge of purple in it. Some people call it pata, foot of the cow, pata de vaca, especially the larger types of orchid trees. But pata de borrego, more of the goat foot, is probably more appropriate for this species of ornamental tree. Very pretty. It does attract butterflies. Very fragrant like flowers. Very showy. Very, very drought tolerant. Once it's established, it does lose its leaves. Gives you in the late fall, winter time, gives you a little bit fall color as well. It's also in the bean or legume family, such as redbuds, Texas Mountain Laurel, and Eve's necklace. So we'll have those little bean pods on it as well. Very pretty white flower, a small dainty flower, and used in landscapes are once it's established, it's very, very drought tolerant as well. Look at that, very beautiful ornamental tree in the right setting, in a very xeric setting, but when it's in full bloom, very attractive plant to look at. Desert willow, it's not really a real thick mass canopy tree. It is a small species of a tree. It's really not a true willow. Very xeric once it's established as well. It has willow-like foliage to it. Um, but it's going to have a kind of a dead back appearance. So you'll have a few dead little limbs every so often in the canopy of the tree. And so it's not going to be very dense. It's a very, very small little deciduous like tree. Very xeric, very drought tolerant once it's established. There's many colors on this. I think the favorite one of mine is this one called Bubba, this cultivated variety cultivar. And Bubba came from Paul Cox, who did. We used to be at the San Antonio Botanical Garden for many years, and he selected this from a seedling. And so Paul Cox named it after Jim Keeter, who used to be the city of San Antonio horticulturalist for many years. It's beautiful, brilliant, a purple color to it, and I think it's one of the best blooming selections of desert willow that we can consider growing here. And that's such a beautiful, beautiful color. Bubba desert willow. So it has its right place in the landscape. So might consider one of these as well. Mexican Buckeye. So pretty much all the trees that we've talked about, these ornamental flowering species, really like the full sun. The redbuds are more late afternoon shade or protected under as an understory tree, under a big live oak. Because if you plant, with the exception of Mexican redbud in full sun, the other ones really like that shade in the summertime. Mexican Buckeye is the same way. It's kind of an understory tree. It's a very unique species of plant. I think this is the only plant in this genus in the world. But Mexican Buckeye is a small tree, gives you brilliant fall yellow color on the foliage. Unique seed pod on it, pretty cool looking flowers. But it's for the shade. It'll take shade. There are other Buckeyes that we can grow here. Some are scarlet Buckeyes that have a bigger leaf, a smaller plant, multi-trunk in the shade. And there's a yellow and white versions of those as well. But Mexican Buckeye is a pretty awesome tree to consider. But again, you train it, trim it up like a multi-trunk bush, and it doesn't really want that full sun in the summertime. It will take that full sun, but it kind of goes through the summer heat if it's in full sun, kind of a burnt appearance, and returns in the fall next spring when it comes out with blooms and new growth as well. Very beautiful flowers, as you see on the left side, and unique seed pods on the right. They turn green, and then when they're fully developed to the right, which is brown. And the old timers used to play marbles with that. They used to extract that seed out of it, and they used to play marbles with that seed. So it's kind of a cool plant. Mexican Buckeye, really a nice xeric plant, more in the shade, unique flower to it as well, and some good fall color. Well, you can't talk about trees that flower unless you talk about crepe myrtles. Crepe myrtles are the queen of flowering plants. Some people call them the lilac of the South. But we really need to study up on crepe myrtles because there's many colors, many selections that are out there. There's the miniature weeping ones that only grow 18 to 24 inches tall. There's dwarf types that are more bush type that grow 4 to 6. There's semi-dwarfs that grow 6 to 10. And then there's the tree types, probably the tallest of all the flowering trees that we've talked about so far. You know, the tree types, particularly the white one, which is called Natchez, and the beautiful Texas Superstar one called Basham's Party Pink. Many crepe myrtles give you fall color. What other tree besides the crepe myrtle blooms as long? No other tree. Crepe myrtles bloom the longest of all the flowering trees. Crepe myrtles have what we refer to as exfoliating bark, meaning the bark kind of sloughs off. It has that smooth texture to it. But we also want to make sure we practice growing crepe myrtles correctly. If you go to our plantanswers.com or Aggie Horticulture website, you can go to the crepe myrtle gallery and look at all the different selections and different hues of colors. So you probably want to plant and purchase crepe myrtles when they're blooming to make sure that's your color, but make sure you get the right size. We do not want to practice crepe murdering, and that's a big no-no, and y'all see it all the time, particularly in the month of January in commercial sites, and yes, unfortunately, even in some residential sites. People cutting these trees down and they're butchering them, and they come out with a bird's nest effect out of that cut, and that shortens the life of the tree, makes the canopy not that strong, and it makes it much more susceptible of some insects that Molly Keck will cover on the second part of the pest series of these ornamental trees. This one that we see is Basham's Party Pink. It's a baby pink, almost a lavender color. It's one of the taller of all the varieties, and it was even designated a couple years ago or so as a Texas Superstar plant. Very few trees are designated as Texas Superstar plant, but this is a home run plant. The white one is called Natchez, and these are beautiful. But again, you don't need to get a plant this big. You train it 3 to 5 to 7 trunks, and you skirt it up to the size, the height that you like it with over time. And crepe myrtles are a cool tree. They do need full sun. These newer varieties that the USDA released many years ago from the National Arboretum are much faster growing, larger leaves, and they're resistant to powdery mildew, which is a fungus on them. So look for more of these hybrid modern day crepe myrtles that grow pretty quick. You know, most of the time when you hear about a tree, I want a tree that's fast growing, but also often that's a trash tree. Fast growing usually equals fast dying. Crepe myrtles, particularly these larger tree types like Basham Sparty Pink and Notches the white one, are pretty fast growing and they're very long lived trees. So there's always a place in full sun with the appropriate height that you need for crepe myrtles in and around your landscape. But because what other plant, tree type, flowering type, particularly in the months of July and August, blooms as much as crepe myrtles? This is a pretty cool picture here. You know, so the ones we showed you are all true ornamental flowering trees. This is a peach. It's called Red Baron peach. This is taken at this Alamo downtown when it was in full bloom. So it's a beautiful tree, trimmed up correctly, but it's a double red blooming peach. Awesome, awesome. There's a lot of ornamental peaches that you can grow. Most peaches that have the edible fruit are pink. This is a double blooming peach. I mean, that's an unbelievable flower that it has. And you can even make cuttings on these when they're dormant and force them inside the house to bloom if your house stays warm during the winter time and get these blooms before they bud out on the tree and flower. But the other cool thing about this red Baron peach, not only ornamental value that we can grow it as a cool looking, unique ornamental flowering peach, is it also is an edible and very tasting freestone peach. So not only a cool plant with unusual double red blooms to it, but it has very tasty peaches to it. So I think that's an added extra thing. Peaches and plums are very beautiful, of course, and there's a lot of other colors of ornamental peaches out there, but I think Red Baron peach, without a doubt, is the winner because you get not only unique double flower red flowers on it, but an edible fruit on it as well. So these are some of my best. I think we covered a few more than 10 of my choices as ornamental. We probably missed a few, but these are the top ones I think really worth considering in that special location after you plan it out in your landscape and work with a Texas certified nursery professional at one of these great independent nurseries. I always like to add a couple bonus plants or so with all my presentations that we. So let's see what our bonus plants are today. Hong Kong orchid tree. Whoa, beautiful orchid-like flowers. They come in different colors of purple. Some are pink, and there's even a white one. They are tender. They are tender, and it has similar to the Bohemia Anacacho tree, much larger leaf to it. So it's truly considered what they refer to as pata de vaca, hoof of the cow, because they have that leaf that looks like cow foot, basically. But this flower is amazing. You really need to look at placement of these much more north of San Antonio. So it'd be best mid San Antonio or south in a microclimate, a semi-protected area that does get at least 6 hours of sun. Normally people try to grow them as single trunk, but often they will freeze down. They will freeze down if we have a uniquely hard winter. But if we have a mild winter, they bloom in January, so that's the coldest month of the year. So they have to bloom off of new wood that they set in the spring through summer, so they can't freeze down, and they bloom very early. So this is a very hit and run, hit and miss plant, you might say. But when this thing blooms, it's a winner. But the prettiest ones you see are in microclimates. You have to do some cleaning up if they do freeze down and retrain them, but you want to try something uniquely different, you might consider the Hong Kong orchid tree, pata de vaca. I really am starting to like these Palo Verdes, and Palo Verde means a green trunk, green tree, and it's a small ornamental tree. You can plant it as a single trunk tree or 3 5 trunks. Very, very, very xeric. So you need a great drainage. You need to make sure you hydrozone this in an area of your landscape that you're not overwatering, because it'll kill it if you get too much water. There are much, much newer selections that have been adapted out of Arizona, even El Paso, into our market. So the varieties that are available at the nurseries bloom much pretty. These yellow, dainty-like flowers with a little bit orange or red in them as well. So you're going to pay a little bit more for these newer cultivated varieties, but I think they're well worth it than just the weedy ones that grow here and there. The cultivated ones just look better. They're aesthetically pleasing. The canopy of the tree, they do give you a little bit fall color, but the blooms, particularly during the summer months, when it's super duper hot, Palo Verde, or some people call them retama trees as well as another name. So that's the bonus plants for the day. Now, I really want you to familiarize yourself with this website, folks. This is our sister agency, the Texas A&M Forest Service. A lot of great information. You know, the Texas A&M Forest Service are the tree people of the Texas A&M University system. But we also are very grateful for them, because when there's emergency, particularly fires around the state, who's the frontline guys? It's our Forest Service. They're great, great folks. Go to this website. They have the Texas A&M Forest Service tree selector. There's a link to it right there. And learn more about these trees that we covered. Plus, a tree in your landscape is the greatest investment for your house, the greatest gift you can give to the next owner, because you're looking for a tree that's a quality tree, and you plan, as we talked about already. So this is going to help you. Any county that you are in the state of Texas, it's going to make you think. And you have to fill out all these variables that it has on it. How tall, how wide, how much space, what do you want, fall color, blooms. This is the greatest selection here to help you with that right tree for the right location in your landscape. The Texas A&M Forest Service Tree Select. So thank you for today. I hope you learned a little bit about my favorite ornamental flowering trees. And we showed you the Forest Service to learn more about that, and other trees in general, bigger trees especially. So we want to make sure that you subscribe to our My Extension 210 YouTube channel for this presentation and others that we have archived there. So capital M and E, and everything is lowercase, 210, one word, My Extension 210 YouTube channel. Please subscribe and keep an eye on all the educational gardening and pest seminars that we do throughout the year. And don't forget my email. And remember, when we were kids, we used to hang around on trees, trees, go hug a tree, go play on a tree. And remember, trees are so important, not only for flowering, for beneficial insects and pollinators, but to shade our houses, save our utility bill during the, particularly large species, during the summertime to cut the AC down, and then winter time on deciduous trees, if properly placed in the landscape, to warm our houses. Don't forget, David Rodriguez here. That's my email address. Give us a holler if we can help with anything. And as always, learn and have fun. Happy gardening, everyone.